It is Football Happy Hour on CBS Sports HQ. Chris Hassel joined in studio by Pete Prisco. We also have Brady, Quinn, and Ryan Wilson. There was only one way to get Pete Prisco in this studio before the start of next season, and that was to have him do a mock. So this is the Pete Prisco mock show. The first of how many? How many mocks you doing?
Probably 3 or 4.
Okay.
And then I'll do one where what they should do instead of what they will do.
Okay.
Which is.
And this mock right here is what you think they'll do.
Of course.
Correct?
That's usually what a mock is. Usually what you think they will do.
Not always.
No,
not always.
Well, I always do one that's what they should do, and usually that's one's a lot better than the one that they do. Actually.
And I hope that's not a shot at Ryan Wilson, who does a mock.
No, he does 450. I took a shot at him in my lead-in. I said, Ryan Wilson. This is my first. Ryan Wilson's done 450 already.
We did a poll in the newsroom. We want a new way to drive traffic to the site called 2-a-days with Ryan Wilson. 2 mocks a day.
I like it.
Instead of 1 mock a week, it's 2 a day from Ryan Wilson. Let's jump right into it, guys. Number 1 overall pick, Jacksonville Jaguars. They took care of the offensive line. Cam Robinson, Sheriff. So you're saying they're going to the edge in Aiden Hutchinson?
They have to. And they're changing the way they play defense. They have one edge rusher in Josh Allen. Kayvon Chason hasn't proven to be worth being an edge rusher, so they have to get another one. And in this scenario, you have to take Aiden Hutchinson. I still think Evan Neal could be in play if you decide you want to go all in on the offensive line and maybe make him a right tackle or play him at guard for a year. But remember, they also had Walker Little, who they drafted last year. So I think this is a scenario where you get another pass rusher. You get Aiden Hutchinson. He's a really dynamic edge rusher. I wonder what his ceiling is, but I think in this scenario, you have to take him.
I'm with you, Pete. He feels like the safest pick to me for Jacksonville in this particular spot. You guys just talked about, obviously, the investments that they've made so far on offense. They got to start investing on that defense. And this is a pick where Pete just mentioned maybe the concern about what is his ceiling. Well, I know he's going to come in right away and be a contributor and be a full-time starter. I don't know if that means he'll be a perennial Pro Bowl caliber player, but we do know he'll be a contributor starter right away and have an impact. I do wonder this, and only because it's topical right now, and so maybe I'll toss this ball to Ryan and see how he feels about it. But you look at the Lions sitting there at 2. Do they feel like they need to move up to the number 1 position if they like Malik Willis, if they like Kenny Pickett, or even the Carolina Panthers, for example, who are sitting back there? Do they want to move up to take maybe one of these quarterbacks in the draft that they like enough to be their guy for the future? I think that's my only question as of right now, given what we've already seen the Jacksonville Jaguars do in free agency and now what we anticipate them doing in the draft on defense.
I think Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes probably feel much safer about where they're sitting at number 2 in terms of whether they should move up, whereas Matt Rule probably feels David Tepper breathing down his neck. He may actually be having those conversations about whether the Panthers should move up, because the Panthers have had 0 success finding the quarterback over the last week of free agency, and now they're pretty much left with the draft. But I'm with Pete and I'm with Brady. I like the Aiden Hutchinson pick here. I will push back, Pete, because I was tasked with actually asking Aiden Hutchinson if he thinks he's reached his ceiling yet. I didn't agree with that, but I was sitting next to him in Indy, so I asked him. He got pretty upset about it, and I made sure to point out that you brought it up first. But I think as he noted, he's 21 years old. He's only going to get better. Now, is he going to end up being a Bosa brother? I don't know, but I think he has a chance to be really successful early on. And as a couple of scouts have told me, he's the safest pick in this draft class. If you feel like you want to take someone where you don't have to worry about the off-the-field stuff or being distracted by TikTok or whatever, he's going to come in right away, contribute, and be an important part of that defense.
You better be nice to me. I'm the mayor of Jacksonville. He better not forget that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if you want to get good with Jacksonville, you get good with Mayor Pete over here. Let's go to number 2, the Detroit Lions. And Brady was wondering, maybe you want to move up to get a quarterback if you think that you have a quarterback that you would really like as your franchise. But at this point, there's not one of those guys out there. But you have a guy in Travon Walker, the defensive end out of Georgia, who's number 7 on Ryan's big board. Why do you like him so much more?
Well, I don't think they're going to take a quarterback. I think they're willing to play with Goff for another year, and they aren't in love with this quarterback class from what I hear. So I think they will pass on a quarterback, and you have to get a pass rusher, and I think he is the next best pass rusher in this class. I think you talk to people around the league, and they have him, a lot of them do, the ones I talk to have him ahead of Thibodeau. And I think that's interesting because there's some concern about Thibodeau and the effort and everything else. So I put Walker in this spot. Look, that was a star-studded defensive line. They're going to have 2 first-round picks on that line next year that played on that same line. I don't think they all played enough. Well, they didn't play enough snaps to rack up a bunch of numbers. I think he's one of those guys going to be better in the NFL than he was in college.
Okay, so he goes to Detroit. At number 3, the Texans with the first of many top 80 picks, including the number 13 overall pick from the Browns. You have them selecting the offensive tackle Evan Neal out of Alabama. Ryan, what do you think of that?
I like it. If you're rolling with Davis Mills and that appears to be the plan, then it makes sense to protect him. He took a ton of hits last season, and Tyrod Taylor took even more hits when he was playing. And to Davis Mills' credit, he played well down the stretch. Now, look, he was in a no-pressure situation, but he still put up some numbers and gave you reason to think that maybe you can move forward with him. And the reality is, if he were in this draft class, had he gone back to Stanford, he's probably the first quarterback drafted. So if you're set there, if you feel like you're set there, if you're Lovie Smith, why not protect him? Now, I like Ike Ekwonu a little bit better than Evan Neal, but they're 1 and 1A for me, and I think Evan Neal, who proved himself at Alabama playing several different positions over the 3-year period there, is worthy of this pick. Is he as good as Jedrick Wills, who went to the Browns as a top 5 pick a few years ago? I think he's slightly less than that, but Wills is a really good player. He's certainly better than Alex Leatherwood, who found his way into the first round last year for the Raiders and has already moved from tackle to guard, and that makes you perhaps think that he shouldn't have gone that high. But I think with Evan Neal, he's a top 5 pick. He's a guy you put in right away, right or left tackle. I mean, you could play him at guard if you want to. He did that early in his career, but I think he's someone that you put on the edge out there and let him handle these pass rushers day in and day out.
This is Pete Prisco's first mock draft, with the draft about 5 weeks away, maybe a little bit less than that. Jets at number 4. They have a couple of top 10 picks. Pete, going with Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon. Brady, Pete says that he would fit perfectly into their scheme.
Yeah, he's not wrong. You know, this would be the direction I think they want to go. They need to improve that defense. They need to improve the pass rush, and Thibodeau has that upside and has that ability, although Pete notes in his column, and he talks about the fact that maybe some scouts have cooled on Thibodeau the more they've gotten to know him. And you start to hear kind of whispers or rumors of, you know, maybe he's more of a kind of businessman, when all these guys are looking for football players who turn into businessmen once they get into the NFL. And maybe that Kayvon Thibodeau made some business decisions throughout the course of the year. Whatever the case may be, you can't dispute his talent and his ability. I think your biggest concern is sometimes he has a tendency to disappear. When you see the highlights, you see him working against lesser offensive linemen, tight ends, running backs. You expect him to win those matchups. Other times versus better opponents, he doesn't win those matchups. So I think there is a little bit of a concern here. In my opinion, he kind of reminds me of Deion Jordan, where you can see the upside, but you can also see where you could go astray. But bottom line, the Jets need this pick. I do want to throw this back to Pete and ask him, with the David Ojabo injury, has that changed anything in your mind as far as how you compare David Ojabo to Kayvon Thibodeau in this particular spot, maybe where the Jets would move? Because I look at both those players as similar as far as their ability, size, and maybe what they could both be in this draft. Obviously, Ojabo now has torn his Achilles, and so I don't know that anyone would take him that high given the injury.
Personally, I prefer Ojabo to Thibodeau, and he would have been in my top 15 had he not torn the Achilles. But I think the league kind of prefers Thibodeau. I don't understand it. I prefer Ojabo. But, yeah, he's fallen down. He's still in my first round, but he's fallen down a little bit.
And Ryan, you mentioned that Aiden Hutchinson got mad at you on set. I was there when Kayvon Thibodeau got mad at you on set as well. So that's 2 of the top 4 players Pete has in his mock that have been mad at Ryan Wilson on the HQ set. How do you think about that?
Oh, me? Yeah, you left out the part, Hassel, where you're the one that got Thibodeau mad at me, but that's awfully convenient of you. I appreciate that.
He's good at that.
Breece Hall also hates me as well. So
Breece Hall, too.
Yeah, Breece Hall came after me. Thanks to Jamie Eisenberg, and also thanks to Brady Quinn, who tried to get Nakobe Dean after me as well, but Nakobe, because he's so smart, didn't fall for it. So Nakobe Dean's my favorite player, basically, is what I'm saying.
I don't know if Icky's been after you yet. That was not Brady?
That was not me, Ryan. I did not point him in your direction. I just kind of started the conversation, okay? I want to put that out there.
Hey, if players don't like you, that's a good thing. That means you're doing your job.
Yeah, nobody likes Pete. Moving on to number 5, Giants. They have 2 of the next 3 picks. And Pete, going with Ike here, Ike Ekwonu, the offensive tackle out of NC State.
Well, they have to fix the offensive line. I mean, they drafted Andrew Thomas. He's actually become a pretty good player at left tackle, was injured last year, missed time, but he's going to be their left tackle. They tried to address the right tackle position. They haven't done it. It's not very good. Matt Pert hasn't worked out. They need to get a right tackle, and I think this guy can slide over to the right side, or if you want to play Thomas on the right side, I think he can play over there as well. You need 2 of them. It's not like left and right anymore. You need both nowadays, so I think this would be a perfect pick for the Giants in this spot.
Okay, and they're also picking 7th overall. But up next, the Carolina Panthers. We've mentioned that they need a quarterback. And Pete, you have them taking a quarterback in Kenny Pickett, who his hands, you can see, they're growing, Pete. They're an eighth of an inch bigger than they were at the combine.
Look, I talked to people from his pro day, and they said he threw the ball fine. He had a couple wobblers, but he threw the ball fine. They're not really concerned about that. And if you're a team in need of a guy who can step in right now and be the most NFL ready to play, it's Kenny Pickett. And when you have Matt Rule, who's probably coaching for his job, I think you have to draft a quarterback who can step in and play. And I think that's why it would be Pickett for me over Willis, and I think they would lean that direction. Don't forget, David Tepper is a Pittsburgh guy. He is from Pittsburgh, and I think it makes sense to draft Kenny Pickett.
Ready?
Yeah, I believe it's the Tepper School of Business there at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. But to Pete's point, he's got the best tape. I mean, if you're purely making this decision of who's the best in this draft class based on tape, it's Kenny Pickett. By far and away this past season, what he did. And you can see the downfield passing, the accuracy, the timing, the anticipation, all the things that you're going to have to do at the next level. He shows that. And on top of that, he's got the ability to buy time and create with his legs. And that's another prerequisite nowadays in the NFL. I think the only concern you have, no, it's not about his hand size that seems to be growing, as Chris pointed out. It's really about the 1 year. And is he a one-hit wonder? I think a lot of that's been alleviated, though, when you see a guy like Joe Burrow who had a similar performance in his final year at LSU. That's alleviated a lot of those concerns with how he's played in the NFL. So I'm with Pete on this one. I think he's done a great job so far with this mock in the sense that if you want a guy you can plug in right away, and he's going to give you the best chance at surviving if you're Matt Rule, it's Kenny Pickett.
Pickett, by the way, also has a little Joe Burrow in him. He's got the fire in the belly.
Fire in the belly.
Fire in the belly.
More important than the size.
He's got a little, and guys I talk to, they say when he walked in, he commanded the room. That's what you want from your quarterback.
All right, so the first quarterback off the board at number 6 in Pete's mock to the Panthers. At number 7, the Giants, after taking an offensive tackle, Ike Ekwonu, going with the safety and Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame. Ryan says that he has Ed Reed type instincts. Ryan?
Yeah, and you know what? He ran in the 4.5s just like Ed Reed did back in the day in 2002. No one seems concerned that Kyle Hamilton ran a 4.59, nor should they be. So I think that's a good sign. Sometimes we get too caught up in the numbers, but in terms of the way he plays, he's such a sideline-to-sideline center fielder, and he can also come downhill. You can line him up anywhere in the secondary, even in the second level, and he is making plays consistently. And, of course, we're watching the Florida State game. Good thing B-Mac's not here. He just went off against Florida State. It was like he was playing against a bunch of Pee-wee guys out there, and that was a fun game to watch. But you saw that consistently for Kyle Hamilton throughout his career, and I think when you're talking about the Giants, and Pete noted this, maybe safety isn't the biggest need, but they have Julian Love and they have Xavier McKinney, two good young players, but you could certainly add some depth there as well. So I like this, especially when you get an offensive lineman with the first-round pick for the Giants, and you circle back and get someone in the secondary, whether it's a cornerback, in this case Kyle Hamilton, who could arguably end up being one of the 2 or 3 best players in this draft class. I think you go ahead and do it.
Kyle Hamilton's the Giants in Pete Prisco's mock draft. At number 8, it's the Atlanta Falcons. They traded away Matt Ryan. They signed Marcus Mariota. Pete has them taking a guy who showed out at his pro day, Malik Willis.
And let me preface this by saying I would not take him in this spot. I just don't think he's worth being picked this high. I could understand why the Falcons will. Until you solve that position, you have to do everything in your power to try and fix it. And by drafting one, if you want to draft one every year, fine, go ahead. But you have to solve the position. So I understand it. And, you know, if they hadn't traded Matt Ryan, I don't think they would have been taking a quarterback in this spot, even though he's a veteran quarterback. They trade him. I changed the pick. I had to redo it yesterday on the fly, and I put Malik Willis in there. I think he's raw. I think he's going to take time. If they do draft him, he could spend a year behind Marcus Mariota, watching him play, and then come in the following year and be the starting quarterback.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think Pete's right about needing people to sit. And I know Brady and Pete and I talked about this at the Combine, where you think he should play immediately. I don't think that's the case with Malik, and there are some things he needs to continue to do. I'll be honest with you. Like, I think upside-wise, I like him better than Kenny Pickett. I know Pete and Brady are bigger in Kenny than I am, and that's fine. But here's the other thing I'll say about Malik Willis. I think he has a chance to be that guy. And, Pete, you noted that sometimes you overdraft these quarterbacks because you're out of options. The Falcons are out of options. Take a risk. Maybe you get Mitch Trubisky. Maybe you get some version of Josh Allen. Maybe you get something in between. But if you don't draft anyone, you're never going to find out. And after having Matt Ryan, who was drafted back in 2008, now's the time to sort of hit the reset button, because I'm pretty sure Arthur Smith didn't come back to be rebuilding in year 2 after they had so many close wins last year and almost made the playoffs.
I look at him as the quarterback we talked about a moment ago in comparison to Kenny Pickett with the most upside in this draft class. You see the big arm, you see the mobility, and the ability to extend plays and really actually be a part of the rushing attack. He brings all of those things. And I am with Pete. I think if you're going to go ahead and draft him in this spot, you got to play him early. And if you look at the Marcus Mariota deal, it's really a one-year deal. And Pete had mentioned this in regards to, I think, Mitchell Trubisky when he had signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, calling him the third bridge in Pittsburgh there. That's probably what Marcus Mariota is. I mean, whether or not Malik Willis plays his rookie season will have a lot to do with Marcus Mariota and how he plays. If he doesn't play well early, Malik Willis, ready or not, it's going to get thrusted in. That is the new age NFL. We don't wait to try to groom these guys. We throw them in there whether they're ready or not and see if they sink or swim and hope that they're able to swim. So, look, as far as the fit goes, I think this is a roster that is depleted right now of some talent outside of Kyle Pitts. Obviously, Calvin Ridley's not going to be a part of this wide receiver group, and the offensive line has experienced issues. So it's a really tough position to be in for any quarterback, let alone a rookie. But he does have some of those tools and intangibles that I think could overcome some of the ability for guys to separate on the outside or some of the protection. But either way, as Pete had mentioned, we've got another bridge there in Atlanta, I think, with Marcus Mariota.
Yeah, but it's the fourth bridge in Pittsburgh. It's not two. It wasn't Two River Stadium. It was Three River Stadium.
I thought you were including. I thought you were including Mitchell as one of the bridges. They renamed it the Trubisky Bridge.
And by the way, when I said that, somebody tweeted at me, said, "Yeah, you're mocking the Andy Warhol name for the bridge. He's from Pittsburgh." I go, "Okay, fine."
Yeah, oh, jeez. You're always getting attacked on social media. Block.
See ya.
Let's move on to number 9, the Seattle Seahawks. And, oh, boy, this is really going to excite the 12s here. Get some protection for Drew Lock and offensive tackle Charles Cross out of Mississippi State, Ryan.
Yeah, I love it, especially if there are two quarterbacks already off the board. As you mentioned, coming in, I have Malik Willis going here because he was the first quarterback drafted at 9. And, if you squint a little bit, perhaps you see Russ Wilson coming out of Wisconsin. Obviously, Russ was a little more polished. Not a question for the Seahawks as the quarterbacks are gone. So they take Charles Cross out of Mississippi State. And, of course, the first question is going to hear, and we talked about this at the Combine, is the run blocking because he plays in that Mike Leach air raid system. And if you go back to Washington State a few years ago, Andre Dillard was a first-round pick for the Eagles, and he's struggled. Charles Cross is not going to have these concerns. He can pass block like he's probably one of the best pass blockers in this draft class. He run blocks extremely well. If you've seen him play the last few years, there's no question about it. So you can have the air raid / Mike Leach concerns, but Charles Cross isn't hearing any of it because he's done those things well at a high level. And when Stone Forsythe, who was last year's day 3 pick, is your starting left tackle as we sit here for the Seahawks, it's probably a good chance inside this top 10 to take an offensive tackle to replace him.
We're still over a month from the draft. Pete, just take a wild guess. Starting quarterback for the Seahawks opening day will be who?
Drew Lock.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Moving to the Jets at 10, who picked 4 already, and Pete had them picking Kayvon Thibodeau. Brady has him going with Ahmad Gardner out of Cincinnati, who did not give up a single touchdown in his college career.
I love this from Pete because Ahmad Gardner was the best cornerback in college football this past season, and he's getting him a lot of props for his film and for his play. He's got that prototypical size and length that Pete Carroll loves in cornerbacks. He's great at the line of scrimmage and press man-to-man or in match zone coverage. He can play off as well. He disrupts passes. He's good in transitions. He really is, to me, the complete package as a cornerback and fits very well within the Seattle Seahawks defensive scheme. So I love this spot. I love this pick. Even though it's for the Jets. Similar scheme, though, with Robert Saleh there. But I love this spot and pick for them. And looking at how he's going to fit in. The roster needs it. That's the other bottom line is they need to be able to rush the passer. They need to be able to stop opponents on the outside. But bottom line is I think he's jumped up a lot of people's draft boards, whether or not they want to admit it or acknowledge it with his play, even though he played at a group of 5 school as opposed to a Derek Stingley or some of the other cornerbacks that we talked about. This young man played the best of everyone at the cornerback position at Cincinnati this past year.
Stingley still on the board. We will see where he goes. Let's recap the top 10 from Pete Prisco in his very first mock of 2022. Aiden Hutchinson, number 1 overall. Kayvon Thibodeau going 4th to the Jets. And a couple of quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett to Carolina at 6. Malik Willis to the Falcons at 8. Texans took Evan Neal with the number 3 overall pick, but they have another top 15 pick in the Deshaun Watson trade. Who are they going to take at 13 overall? Pete's mock continues. We're going through Pete Prisco's first mock draft. We already did 1 through 10. It started with Aiden Hutchinson to the Jags. Had a couple of quarterbacks go off the board. Kenny Pickett to Carolina, Malik Willis to the Atlanta Falcons. The very last pick by the Jets, Ahmad Gardner, the great cornerback out of Cincinnati. The Jets also had Kayvon Thibodeau go number 4 overall. Let's get to number 11 with Pete Prisco, Brady Quinn, and Ryan Wilson, our mock draft expert. How does it feel to do a mock when you got a guy like Ryan Wilson staring over your shoulder who does one every week, Pete?
Oh, I applaud him for doing as many as he does. I would go nuts.
Yeah,
I mean, I would go
I don't
nuts.
know how he stays so sane.
I don't either.
Number 11, Washington. I'm not ready to call them the Commanders yet. Washington taking a wide receiver here, Drake London. Why is he your number 1 over Olave, over some of the others as well that I think Ryan had ahead of him in his mock?
Well, he's not my number 1. But talking to guys around the league, I think they see him as the number 1 wide receiver. He's big, he's tall, he can get down the field. He's not slow. He's more of a long strider, but he's not slow. And when you look at Washington's makeup on offense, they drafted De'Ami Brown last year. They think he's going to be a big-time player. He's a fast receiver, so kind of does the same stuff that Garrett Wilson and Olave do. Now they need to get another bigger receiver to go with him and Terry McLaurin, and I think Drake London is that guy. So I think this would actually be a really good pick. If you're trying to build that thing up around Carson Wentz to make it easy for him, go get him another weapon.
Yeah, I think Carson Wentz going to need a little bit more than that, but I'm with you on Drake London, Pete. The folks I've talked to around the league love him too. I had a scout compare him to a bigger version of Devontae Adams, and he wasn't kidding. Like he likes him that much. And the pushback you'll get, especially when you're sort of on Pete's favorite place, draft Twitter, is that he doesn't get a lot of separation. He seems to be wide open a lot, whether that's high point catching the ball or outrunning people down the field. So I'm not concerned about his ability to separate. And he's extremely close for me. And Chris, you mentioned this. I have Garrett Wilson slightly ahead of him, but I love Drake London's game. They're two different types of players for sure. But I've had Garrett Wilson going in this spot in recent weeks, and even with Matt Corral still on the board, if you're not sold on the quarterback here, they got Carson Wentz. Although Ron Rivera seems to be all in, maybe Corral could be an option if you like him as an evaluator in Washington.
Corral still on the board here in Pete Prisco's mock as we get to number 12 in the Minnesota Vikings, and it's Derek Stingley Jr., the LSU cornerback. Brady, a guy who hasn't been able to play much football over the last year.
Yeah, I mean, this is really a bet and a draft pick on a guy who played his best football when he was a freshman at LSU. It's a big-time need for the Minnesota Vikings, so that makes a lot of sense. And I can understand why, Pete put him here, because that freshman year was outstanding. And if you look at the height, size, measurements, all the things that we talked about with Ahmad Gardner, it's the same thing with Derek Stingley. The problem is you haven't seen it in a few years. And that's the concern is, can the Minnesota Vikings get it out of him? Can he be the player that he was back in 2019? I think he can. I think it's just a matter of, fitting in the right system, then adjusting to the NFL style defensive scheme, but also the offenses and the matchups you're going to see. Bottom line, though, considering what he went up against during his time at LSU at wide receiver, I think he'll adjust just fine. Again, you just hope you're getting the 2019 version of what you saw from Derek Stingley. Because if that's the player you're getting, you got one hell of a player on your roster.
All right, let's get to the teens now, and the Houston Texans coming up again. Pete had them taking offensive tackle Evan Neal with their first pick, number 3 overall. This is the pick from the Cleveland Browns in the Deshaun Watson trade, and it's linebacker Devin Lloyd out of Utah.
Yeah, and I almost had him going in the top 8. I considered it. This is a guy, a lot of scouts comparing to Micah Parsons because he can do so many things. He can rush from the outside. He can, he's a good speed run and chase linebacker. You can blitz him. And so I think this fits with what the Texans are doing. Get a playmaker on defense and you start rebuilding your defense. He would fit perfectly what they want to do.
And Davis Mills, the guy moving forward?
He has to be. I mean, look, like Ryan said, and I agree with him 100%, and I'm a big Davis Mills guy. You know that. He would have been the first quarterback taken in this draft.
All right, that's for the Texans with their second pick in the top 13. Let's move to the Baltimore Ravens at number 14. And Ryan, it's a guy whose stock has just exploded over the last couple of months in edge Jermaine Johnson out of FSU.
Yeah, he transferred from Georgia to Florida State where he had 11.5 sacks last year. And I think Brady was on set when we talked to Jermaine. And he almost had a chip on his shoulder talking about going down to play the ACC like he wasn't playing against a bunch of dudes that were going to be in the NFL. But he showed up each and every week, and he not only played well over the course of his season, but once he got to the Senior Bowl, he was destroying guys in one-on-one drills and team drills. And then he got to the Combine and ran those ridiculous numbers. And also feels like he has a lot to prove. And one of the important things we talk about this time of year is, does he love football? It's clear that Jermaine Jermaine Johnson loves football, and that's one thing you don't have to worry about if you're a team. And as Pete notes, he goes to a Baltimore team that desperately needs help on the edge, opposite Odafe Owe, who was their first-round pick last year and flashed at times last year. They have Tyus Bowser, who can obviously play. They have Jalen Ferguson, who hasn't quite lived up to the sack daddy nickname he had in college. And I think having that booking of Jermaine Johnson opposite Odafe Owe, it will be incredibly important to bring that defense back to what we're used to seeing, and at times didn't really have last year after Matt Judon ended up in New England.
All right, now to the Philadelphia Eagles portion of the draft. At number 15 is Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle out of Georgia. Brady?
He's an absolute mammoth of a human being. And I think the concern was, is he too big to be able to stay on the field for all 3 downs or be in there in passing situations? And one of the things you can glean from the combine for a big guy like that is, can he lose weight? He did. He looked agile. He looked incredibly athletic for as big as he is. And I think he alleviated a lot of concerns from teams that it's going to be an issue keeping him on the field all 3 downs or him getting worn out by the 4th quarter in a hot, humid environment. There's going to be none of that. So I love this selection here. I know they just signed Fletcher Cox back on a 1-year deal, but I think you pair these two up next to each other in the interior of a defense. I mean, who's going to be able to run against the Eagles with those 2 massive human beings? And the other thing is, with an interior guy like that, I think a lot of times you look for interior guys who have quicks, who can rush the quarterback and get to the quarterback. With a bigger body like this, it's not even so much about getting to the quarterback. It's about collapsing the pocket and getting push. And he's big enough where Jordan Davis's arms and length will get that big body up in front of a quarterback, push that guard or center back into the quarterback's lap. He's got nowhere to go and let the edge rushers do the rest. So he might not get a ton of sacks, but trust me, the pressure he creates will be felt. So I love this spot for him. I love this pick. He's a hell of a young man if you have the chance to talk to him. So I'm really excited to see what he'd be playing next to Fletcher Cox.
First of back-to-back picks for the Eagles. They have taken wide receivers in the first round each of the last 2 drafts. And Ryan, it's likely they're going to do it again because they have 3 picks in 5 spots here in the late teens. And Pete has them taking Chris Olave out of Ohio State.
And I've regularly had them taking wide receivers in the first round as well because, as you know, Chris, they have those 3 first-round picks, and they have needs there. Jalen Reagor hasn't quite yet hit that first-round stride, and, of course, you always throw back in the Eagles' fans' face. You passed on Justin Jefferson when he was sitting there to take Jalen Reagor. Maybe Jalen Reagor figures it out this year. Devonta Smith had a really good rookie campaign. He's only going to get better. And I think with Chris Olave here, I like it, but I actually like Garrett Wilson better than Olave. It's funny because Garrett Wilson told us at the Combine that Olave was faster than he was, and he was for about 15 minutes until they fixed those 40 times. Garrett Wilson ended up being faster. I think Garrett Wilson plays faster. I think he's more athletic and more dynamic. But I get Chris Olave here. It's not something I'm going to pan. But if I'm making that selection, if I'm the Eagles, I'm probably leaning Garrett Wilson. Either way, get a wide receiver to help Jalen Hurts.
How do you compare the 2, Pete?
Oh, I prefer Wilson. Jamison Williams would have been my first receiver. When he got hurt, he dropped down, and Wilson would be my first receiver. Absolutely. Okay. I agree with Ryan.
Have the Eagles taken Olave at 16. To the Chargers at 17, it's a guy who Ryan had going 40th in his latest mock draft. Pete, why do you like Trevor Penning, the offensive tackle out of Northern Iowa, so much?
Again, this is more of a pick that I think will happen, and they need a right tackle. I mean, in the worst way possible. You saw that spinning top Storm Norton play over there last year, and he was awful for most of the season. They have to get better at right tackle. I know this kid has played left tackle, but I think he's one of those big physical guys. Much like the Bills used Spencer Brown, they moved him, they played him at right tackle. I think this kid will slide over and play right tackle. Have to address the offensive line. You have those weapons, you have that quarterback, you have to get the offensive line right.
Throwing some bison around there as well, Northern Iowa. Locking horns with North Dakota State often in FCS play. Let's move on to the Saints at 18. Jameis Winston re-signed as the quarterback, getting him some help. Garrett Wilson is the pick here, Brady.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You just heard the guys talking about, kind of who would have been the number 1 if Jameson Williams would have stayed healthy. Garrett Wilson, to me, was the next wide receiver in contention for that top spot. I just think you look at his overall dynamic ability, whether it's the short intermediate routes or the downfield passing game. He's a home run hitter. That's what he is. This offense could use that. I think Jameis Winston showed improvement in the short sample size we saw in New Orleans last year before the knee injury. And so, that adding, some more firepower to this offense, along with the fact that we don't know what to think of the Michael Thomas situation right now. Has he had surgery? What's going on there? And look, if they want to pair them together, so be it. That makes them more explosive. But if they want to move on from a contract that some would claim is bloated, you've got the ability to do that now with a guy that I think you can rely on in his rookie year by creating a big-time impact in Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, look, Jameis Winston's a deep ball thrower. Take the shot. In this situation, I think they pass on taking a quarterback here, although they will consider it. And you've got to get a wide receiver in this draft.
So many quarterbacks on the roster. You got Taysom Hill.
They got Jameis Winston, a gimmick, and Ian Book, who looked awful last year.
Oh man, Brady, you going to take that on Ian Book?
I mean, it was his first start ever.
Notre Dame. Wake up the echoes. Here we go.
Oh, I love getting Pete and Brady going on that.
Still waiting for an Arizona State player. At what point do we have one of those guys drafted in this year's draft, Pete?
Never. They're a bad program with a bad coach who needs to go. How's that?
Oh, boy. It's not coming up next. That would be a Clemson Tiger for the Eagles up next, and cornerback Andrew Booth Jr., Ryan.
Yeah, I like Andrew Booth Jr. a lot. He played really well this year, and I do wonder, and I think this is a good fit too for what the Eagles certainly need in the secondary. I do wonder if I like Dax Hill a little better out of Michigan. He's a little more versatile, plays inside, but Andrew Booth was all that and then some this year, and they did it without Darian Kendrick, who had transferred to Georgia. A big play guy, didn't have a lot of experience coming into this season, but you wouldn't know him to watch him play. Moves extremely well going forward and backwards, and I think he's a first-round pick all day long. I just wonder if there were some other guys that maybe were whether in consideration, whether it's Dax Hill out of Michigan or Trent McDuffie out of Washington. When you have Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox and not much else, I understand why you take a cornerback here, and Andrew Booth Jr. makes a ton of sense. I'm not at all upset by this pick.
All right, let's go to number 20 in the Pittsburgh Steelers. And when you start looking at the quarterbacks in that AFC North, I mean, it's the three guys at the top, and then it's Mitch Trubisky. You know, you got Lamar, Deshaun, Joe Burrow now. So you have the Steelers going with the quarterback here, Matt Corral.
Yeah, and this isn't the quarterback I would take in this spot, but I think the league likes Matt Corral more than we think.
Who would you take here?
I would take Desmond Ridder. I think Desmond Ridder is going to be the sleeper of this quarterback class. And the more I watch him, the more I like. And I know Ryan probably disagrees with me, but the more I watch Desmond Ridder, that's who I would take. But I have the Steelers taking Matt Corral. And you could see him fitting into what they want to do on offense. They want to use those RPOs and get the ball out and all that stuff. So he's been good at it. I think it makes some sense for the Steelers. Again, a team that has to keep addressing the quarterback position until you get it right. You got it right with Ben Roethlisberger. Now he's gone, so you have to find a way to figure it out. And Trubisky clearly is not the answer.
Well, Pete, you could say Trubisky's not the answer, but he's there, and I think he's actually an upgrade over what Matt Corral would end up being. And I'm with you. I think Desmond Ridder is the next quarterback that I'd look at in this draft class, or Sam Howell. I'm higher on both those two guys than I am on Matt Corral. I just think when you're playing in the AFC North and having played in it before, it's a tough physical division, and I do worry about Matt Corral's size. He's not the biggest quarterback. He obviously dealt with getting a little bit banged up this past season playing in the SEC. Well, imagine what it's going to be like playing 17 games in the NFL, and especially behind that offensive line, which still hasn't been reworked to the point where you would feel comfortable back there playing a rookie that's not able to protect himself. So if this is the route they go, it would make sense. I just don't know if this is the exact quarterback they'd go with. To me, Ryan, it's going to be a tough transition because of the offense that he's coming from. Not a lot of timing elements, not a lot of anticipatory throws that you typically like to see, and then able to translate over in the NFL level.
Yeah, plus your guy, Matt Canada's calling the plays there, who sort of favors that RPO style, so you wonder how that's going to fit together with Mr. Trubisky. Brady, I think you're right about Mitch actually probably being a better an upgrade over what could be here at 20. And, Pete, you're also right. The folks I've talked to in the league, they like Matt Corral more than some of these other quarterbacks. Matt Corral's my QB1, just so we're full disclosure here. But also, I like Sam Howell, too, so I can be on both sides of the fence there, Pete. I agree with you, and I agree with Brady. But here's what I ask you, Pete. If they have Mr. Trubisky for 2 more years, and you have Kenyon Green sitting there, the interior offensive lineman at Texas A&M, Zion Johnson, Tyler Linderbaum. Why not go draft one of those guys if you're the Steelers and give Mr. Trubisky even more of an advantage against what's going to be an incredibly difficult route to a playoff game in the playoff appearance in the AFC North?
Did Mitch Trubisky wash the stink off in his year in Buffalo? I mean, what are we doing here? He was run out of Chicago. They didn't think he was any good. You're a Bears fan. Did you think he was good?
No, but I mean, I think what they're saying is they went and signed him, so he's going to be their guy.
He'll be their guy for a year at least. Yeah. I get that. I mean, whoever they draft, if they draft a quarterback, isn't.
You didn't think Josh Allen whispered sweet nothing?
No,
this is how you play.
No.
Doesn't work like that,
I guess. He's just completely letting Matt Nagy off the hook, right? I mean, I guess we'll see what happens with Justin Fields in Chicago this year. But I guess he wasn't part of the problem either, right? It was all on Trubisky. Is that what you're telling me?
Look, I wouldn't draft a quarterback in the first round, but these quarterback-needy teams have to find one. They have to. And I'm not talking about stopgap bridge quarterbacks. They have to find guys. Long-term sustainability comes from the quarterback position if you fix it. And Mitch Trubisky isn't fixing it.
We are 20 picks into Pete Prisco's very first mock draft of this 2022 season. This is 11 through 20. And that was the only quarterback taken here, but the third quarterback taken overall. Did have a little bit of a run on wide receivers with Drake London going to Washington, Chris Olave to the Eagles, and Garrett Wilson to the Saints. Up next, the Packers have a pick. No longer have Davante Adams for Aaron Rodgers to throw to. So, will they finally draft a wide receiver in the first round?
Welcome back into CBS Sports HQ, taking a look at Pete Prisco's very first mock draft, pretty much ever. 1.0 is what we're calling it. Taking a look at 11 through 20, you heard Chris Hassel mention a little bit of a run on wide receivers there, now headed to Washington, Philly, and New Orleans as well. Also, Pete's third quarterback going off the board, Matt Corral to the Steelers at 21 through 10. He had Kenny Pickett going to Carolina at 6 and Malik Willis to the Falcons at 8. So let's welcome back in our trio, Pete Prisco with me here on set, Ryan Wilson, also Brady Quinn. Let's start with the Patriots at 21. Pete has them taking Texas A&M offensive tackle Kenyon Green. Ryan, in your latest mock, you have the Patriots taking a cornerback. So how do you feel about Green?
No, Pete's right, because they traded Shaq Mason. They need to, I can't believe this name hasn't come up yet. They need to protect my guy, McCorkle Jones, the best quarterback in the last 2 years, if we're being honest. So that makes sense with this pick here. But as I mentioned, and Pete didn't answer this a moment ago before the break, the Steelers need to take someone like Kenyon Green over a quarterback because they need to protect their quarterback as well. But I think it certainly makes a ton of sense in New England where they could even go cornerback, as you mentioned, Amanda, wide receiver. They have needs there. But Kenyon Green had a really good year for Texas A&M. He can play inside or out. He'll probably kick inside at the next level and be a day one starter.
Let's go to the Packers at 22, which is where we now see the Packers. No more Davante Adams. In exchange, they get this pick from the Raiders there. Pete, both you and Ryan have them taking a wide receiver here, which they have not done in a very long time at the first round. And you're going with Jahan Dotson.
Yeah, and I think that they have to address wide receiver in the first round. When you trade away Davante Adams, you have to replace him. And this kid will come in. He's an explosive player. The scouts love him. He's another kid that scouts and personnel people love a lot more than the draft community does, the draft media community. And I think he fits with what they want to do. So address the position. You have to.
They're going to address it here. We'll see what they do at 28 as well, according to Pete Prisco. Let's go to the Cardinals at 23. Brady, we'll send this one to you. Pete has them trying to fill the spot of Chandler Jones, and they're looking at George Karlaftis.
Yeah, look, he's a talented pass rush out of Purdue. I talked to some of the coaching staff there at Notre Dame. They said he was one of the best they faced in the past couple of years. He's got a variety of moves. He's got a nonstop motor, all the things that you're looking for. And you got to replace Chandler Jones, who's moved on to be with the Las Vegas Raiders at this point. So it makes a lot of sense from that standpoint. As far as what his ceiling is, I think that's maybe a little bit up, for question. But that being said, much similar to how we talked about with Aiden Hutchinson, this is the type of player that I think comes in and immediately has an impact on your defense and is able to help out a void left behind with the departure of Chandler Jones.
We find the Dallas Cowboys with the 24th overall pick in this year's draft. Ryan, both you and Pete have them selecting the same player right now in Iowa's Tyler Linderbaum.
Yeah, he's a really good football player. Could end up being the best offensive lineman in this draft class. He was sub 300 pounds at the combine, so make of that what you will. He's also a wrestler, and we know in high school he wrestled Tristan Wirfs twice. They split those matches, so that gives you some idea of how strong he is. Fantastic athlete in space. He's really good on the interior there, and he's a team leader. So all the things you want. You have Connor McGovern and Tyler Biadasz right now in Dallas. This would be an upgrade and certainly something you would like to do for your quarterback and your running game and everything that goes along with it. So I think if Tyler Linderbaum's there, and he could be gone before this for sure, that this feels like a pretty easy pick for the Cowboys.
What about the Bills at 25? Brady, we'll start with you here. Another offensive lineman off the board for Pete Prisco. He has them selecting Zion Johnson from Boston College.
You know what I like about this pick is, they need to obviously address the offensive line and help get, some improvement there. Zion Johnson's an interior player. He has played tackle, so he could technically move outside. I don't see him being that at the next level, though. He's a road grader, and I think that's one of the elements that's missing from this offense is when they need to run the football, they have to have the ability to do so, and I don't think they can unless you include Josh Allen as a part of that. So he's strong at the point of attack. He's got some pop in his hands. He does have, some weaknesses, at least in his pass sets and his overall ability in pass protection, but he will continue to improve. So this pick makes a lot of sense for a variety of reasons for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, he's going to play guard in the NFL, but he also worked out at center at the Senior Bowl. And I think when you look at the Bills, Mitch Morse, is getting up a little older in the years. They might want to replace him eventually. And their left guard, Ryan Bates, is a restricted free agent. He's taken tours around the league, so he might be gone as well. So they need to get an offensive lineman. They did a nice job. They got Roger Saffold to play right guard. Now they need to find a left guard.
All right, let's go to the Titans at 26. Our third offensive lineman off the board in a row. Now, this is somebody that Ryan does not have in his first round at all. You are going with Tyler Smith from Tulsa.
I would advise Ryan to put him in the first round because the league loves him. And people who watch him are just enamored with how good he can be on the next level. He played left tackle at Tulsa, but I think in this scenario, he would play right tackle for the Titans. Their right tackle is a disaster right now. I think he would play right tackle for them. And eventually, he would be the left tackle when they do move on from Taylor Lewan, which will happen at some point because when you get older, they cut you. We know how this league is. So I think he's a right tackle immediately, then he moves to left tackle.
Ryan, you have him sitting at 40 right now going to Seattle. Have you had him in your first round at all?
No, I've had him in the second round. Usually, I would advise Prisco to go watch the right tackle, Chris Paul, who is also a really good player for Tulsa. And Pete's right. The NFL teams do like him. I like him in round two, and we'll see. We'll find out together. Look, the reality is that we're just throwing darts. But if Pete has him in his first round, I can certainly respect that. But Chris Paul, his teammate, is a really good football player, much in the same way, and Pete knows this, that Bernard Raymond, the left tackle for Central Michigan, his right tackle, Luke Gedeke, is a really good football player, too, who could also sneak into round two.
All right, guys, hang on just a second. Let's recap really quickly, 21 through 26. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll do the rest there. So Cowboys, Bills, Titans all getting help on the offensive line. And the Packers, Pete Prisco has them. No more Davante Adams, taking a wide receiver in the first round. Packers have not done that since 2002. Coming up, we'll go to the bottom of Pete Prisco's first round mock draft. Two more wide receivers make it in, but where will they land? Could the Packers be doubling down? That's next. Welcome back. Walking you through Pete Prisco's first mock draft here. So far, from what I have seen, not a ton of complaints from our guys. We'll see if we can finish it out that way. Taking a look at the final 6 picks here, including the Lions sitting there at 32, getting the Rams first round pick for sending them Matt Stafford. Let's welcome back Pete Prisco, Brady Quinn, and Ryan Wilson. Let's start with the Bucs at 27. Things have changed for the Bucs quite a bit in the past couple of weeks here. Brady, I want to start with you because Pete and Ryan have the exact same pick here, Georgia's Devontae Wyatt. Now, Pete says he has heard some scouts like Wyatt actually more than his teammate, Jordan Davis.
And that may be the case. I'm not in that group, especially based on what I saw from Jordan Davis and just slimming down at the combine. I think he proved a lot. Seeing him move just as well as Devontae Wyatt at a size that's much greater than him. But this pick makes a lot of sense. Very comparable player as far as skill set and ability. And this is a need for the Tampa Bay Bucs, right? And Ndamukong Suh is still a free agent at this point in time. You pair Wyatt next to Vita Vea, and with that linebacking group, I mean, you've got the run game pretty much taken care of. And obviously a pass rush as well, because Wyatt gives you some of that as an interior player. And this really comes down to two, I think, for probably the Tampa Bay Bucs. Given that Tom Brady's coming back, they'll probably take best player available. The guy who's going to impact them the most, I think, for this upcoming season as they try to put together another Super Bowl run in what could be Tom Brady's last year. But Wyatt makes a lot of sense for their team needs.
Yeah, I prefer Jordan Davis to Devontae Wyatt as well, but there are some scouts who actually like Wyatt more. I don't. I think Davis, in fact, could end up going in the top 10, where I don't think Wyatt will go in the top 10. But he fits with what Tampa Bay needs, and Brady mentioned it. The Ndamukong Suh's probably out of there. They need another guy to play next to Vita Vea.
And again, this is all what you think is going to happen.
What I think, not what I would do.
Not what you would do, but that is to come later on in the process. All right, let's go back to Green Bay at 28. Their second pick now in the first round. Pete, as I mentioned coming into this, it's been a long time since the Packers took a wide receiver. No more Davante Adams, and you have them doubling down on this position.
2002.
Yep.
Javon Walker. And I remember him. He was from Florida State. He was a long strider, and Jamison Williams is a long strider. So I have him taking Jamison Williams from Alabama. They can afford this. And the reason they can afford this, if you go get the wide receiver earlier in the first round, you can come back and be patient with Jamison Williams. And he tore his ACL, but we know how this is going these days. Medicine is amazing. He could be back mid-season, playing at a high level. He is the best receiver in this draft class. By far, in my book, I think he's the best receiver in this draft class, which is why I think the Packers could take a shot on taking him and getting him back midway through the season.
If you're not worried about him, do you think he'd go higher?
Oh, if he was healthy, he'd be a top 10 pick.
All right, we're going to get to an injury here in a second, though, but let's go to the Dolphins. 29. Ryan, Pete says he's assuming they're going to take a little tackle in free agency, so he has them taking Nakobe Dean. However, I was looking at your latest mock, and this is 13 spots lower than where you have him going.
Yeah, I'm a huge Nakobe Dean guy, and his measurables aren't necessarily there. He hasn't run yet. I think he has an ankle injury. He didn't run at the combine, didn't run his pro day. Look, man, maybe he runs a 4.9. I don't care. He is such a smart, physical football player, and he plays much faster than whatever he may run that he's afraid to perhaps put on tape. I don't care. He's an incredibly good football player. I'm sort of surprised that Pete didn't go with the running back here, maybe Ken Walker or Breece Hall, but I know Pete loves those running backs, so maybe he circles back in his 2-round mock draft to address those needs. But what does Nakobe Dean give you? He gives you a lot of this. And look, you could say, well, he played behind all those guys at Georgia that didn't get drafted in the first round. That dude is orchestrating everything that happens. Every one of his teammates that we talked to at the combine couldn't speak highly enough of just how important he was to what they were doing. And he's also making plays. He's not just out there wearing the green dot, so to speak, and pointing guys where to go. He's more than that. He's one of the best athletes on the field, and we saw it week in and week out. I think it makes sense in Miami, where they have 5 off-ball or inside linebackers about to hit either free agency or 1 year left on the deal. So Nakobe Dean would be a good fit in Miami for sure.
What was that face?
Well, he's take a running back. Take a running back
You
there.
should have seen Pete's face. It was
Come
not
on,
a good
he knows
face.
better than that. He knows better to even throw that out there when he's talking about me taking running backs in the first round. No way.
Let's go to the Chiefs at 30. Brady, this is someone I saw pop up in one of Ryan's mock drafts, I think maybe like 2 weeks ago for the very first time. And sure enough, here he is in Pete, Boye Mafe.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, I think, for the Chiefs and what their needs are. They've got to help improve that defense. And really, Frank Clark, I don't think he's really hasn't given the Chiefs what they've looked for in that trade for him initially. You know, they've got Chris Jones rushing from the interior. They experimented with putting him on the edge. That didn't work out. Boye Mafe is a bit raw, but he will give you that explosion off of the edge. He's continued to rise, I think, in a lot of people's opinions from this past season in through the Senior Bowl, into the Combine, where you saw his athleticism and his explosion. So I think this is a great selection here. I know I've been really complimentary of Pete, so we need to do a mock 2.0 at some point so I can bash some of these picks.
I told you, they were
You
very
can't help it.
complimentary.
Wait,
There was the one
it's
thing
hard
you
to-
disagreed on.
It's hard to, bang on a mock draft when it's a month to go, you know?
Oh, I thought you were about to just bang on your own drum and just say when it's so perfect.
No, it's not perfect. Believe me, I will change this like Ryan does every week just to get clicks.
Let's go to the Bengals at 31. This one is someone who is solidly in the first round, had a devastating pro day towards Achilles. David Ojabo here. Look, this injury much sooner than what we saw with Jamison Williams.
You know, in watching Ojabo play during the season, I sent out a tweet and I talked to Ryan about this. I think he had higher upside to his game than Hutchinson, which is saying something because Hutchinson's a heck of a football player. This is terrible for the kid. I feel bad for him. It's going to knock him down. Whether it knocks him out of the first round, we don't know. But I have the Bengals taking him. And the reason I have the Bengals taking him because they've solidified their offensive line. Yeah, they could take a corner in the spot, maybe. But why not get another young edge rusher? And with medicine being what it is, Cam Akers came back quickly. I think he might be able to play at some point during the season. And if he can do that and give them a third edge rusher to really, give them a dynamic edge rusher, I think that will help their defense.
All right, finally, let's go to the Lions at 32. Pete has them taking yet another wide receiver here in Arkansas's Treylon Burks. Ryan, we'll give you first say on this one.
Yeah, he ran the 4.55 at the combine, and that turned some people off. But look, that's sort of how he plays. I still think he has the ability to separate the second half of routes. When you watch him at Arkansas, he was running away from guys, whoever the SEC opponent was. And here's the deal. If you like A.J. Brown or Juju Smith-Schuster or Anquan Bolden, that's who Treylon Burks is. He's a bigger version of those guys, except for perhaps A.J. Brown, and he gives you that. So I like the fit in Detroit, where they have some young wide receivers. They're Amon-Ra St. Brown, for example. They signed D.J. Shark on that relatively cheap deal, and they're going to have to figure out the quarterback situation. But one more weapon for Jared Goff going into next season. They're going to be a better football team in Detroit, and I like everything that Treylon Burks did at Arkansas, and I don't care about the 40 time. That doesn't take away from who he was as a player last season in the SEC.
Yeah, the personnel people like him a lot more than I do. I always worry about a guy who doesn't have explosive ability, and I don't know if he does. He doesn't run away. I mean, I know he ran away from some guys, but he's not a separator. That worries me. And as we put up a tape and see him separating against Texas A&M. But I think this is one of those situations where this is where the Lions could actually take a quarterback if they consider it. And Desmond Ridder would make sense in this spot because you could play him, let him sit behind Goff for a year, and then maybe he's the long-term future. Because I still don't know if they think Goff is, but maybe you draft a quarterback in this spot. But I did have him taking a wide receiver here.
Okay, so far you only have 3 quarterbacks going in the first round. If there was a quarterback here, who would it be?
Desmond Ridder, for sure.
Is that what you just said?
Yeah, he would be. Yeah, he would be my quarterback if I would take him here.
I was listening to our producer there. All right, guys, thanks so much. Let's recap Pete Prisco's first mock draft. By the way, you can check it out on CBSSports.com. Says, look, there's still not a clear number 1. Right now, he is going with Aiden Hutchinson to the Jags. He also has Kenny Pickett as the first quarterback off the board. Going to the Panthers there at 6, followed up by Malik Willis to the Matt Ryanless Falcons at 8 now. 11 through 20, another quarterback. Going all the way down to the bottom there, Matt Corral at 20. Pete has him going to the Steelers, giving Corral yet another year to learn before taking over the next season. And 21 through 32, no more quarterbacks as of right now, unless he changed something there. This is 21 through 26. My apologies there. And Jahan Dotson, another wide receiver to the Packers. He also has them taking another wide receiver at 28. As well. There is the final few picks there, ending with Treylon Burks, but again saying, look, he may have them taking, we'll have to tune in to mock draft 2.0.
And 3.0 and 4.0.
So those, are you going to do?
I'll probably do 3 or 4. So the graders don't get mad at me. You know, they have these mock draft graders out there.
I heard you got yelled at today on Twitter.
Yeah, I get yelled at all the time on Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care.
Thanks so much. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.